Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Laura, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm so glad you're here today with me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And for our subscribership, we have Laura Meyer here, and she is the CEO and founder of Envision Horizons. So she's bootstrapped her business, and she's also a mom. So Laura, tell us a little bit more about your background and your business.
Absolutely. I mean, if we really want to go way back to the beginning, I joke that I grew up in retail. So I worked in my dad's hardware store as a kid growing up. So retail has always been in my blood. Our family trips were to the Ace Hardware shows in Orlando. Very kind of, Midwest upbringing. And really my first job out of college was with Amazon corporate. And that's really how I got down the path of being an Amazon marketing expert was I worked for their marketing group or their advertising group in New York City. And then in 2017, I launched Envision Horizons, but I also launched my own private label business where I was selling men's undershirts on Amazon.
Right.
And the reason I did that was I really wanted to understand the supply chain side of business, the logistics of business, e-commerce business, because I knew the media side really well, having done ad sales and also having worked at Amazon's media group. But, there's what I think makes e-commerce so fascinating is just how dynamic it is. Like if you're an e-commerce manager, you need to understand market demand. You need to understand sourcing and supply chain. You need to understand, obviously, like SEO and optimization and advertising. It really, it works all sides of your brain, which is really exciting, but also can be a little overwhelming too when you have those initial learning curves.
Definitely, for sure. Thank you for sharing with us. And so when it comes to leadership lessons, tell me more about as you've grown your business, what type of leadership lessons have kind of come up for you in the forefront?
Yeah, there's been a lot. So I think the first one that really stands out to me is I started this business when I was 25 years old. I was a typical millennial, let's be a young entrepreneur, and wanted to be the cool, hip founder. And I quickly learned, well, it wasn't so quickly, it took me a few years to learn that as a leader, like being a leader in business doesn't mean you should be and can be everyone's friends. And in the very beginning, giving harsh feedback was really difficult for me because I cared so much about being liked. When the lesson and the reality of it is that one, you need to have the right people in the right seats. Just because you think someone is a great person and you could be friends with them outside of the workplace doesn't necessarily mean that they're right for your company and your organization. And as a leader, you really need to think through what that role is accountable for, how you're going to measure it, setting objective KPIs. Because I think what can easily happen in any size organization, but especially a young and growing organization, is you have like a vague idea of what you need help with. You have so much going on. You don't really think through the job responsibilities. So you just make a hire and then they're not meeting your expectation. You get frustrated and things can implode.
Right.
So I think a big lesson in the last 6 years or almost 6 years that I've run my agency is that you really need to have defined roles, but you also really need to have a like scorecard method in place or KPIs for their first 90 days so that you don't get to a point where they think they're doing great and you think they're not meeting expectations. You always want to have that communication.
Exactly. There should be no surprises when it comes to people's performance, for sure. And I think that's just the human side of the business, right? Like, I've seen oftentimes when it comes to performance that you can have a great scorecard in place or OKRs or SMART goals or whatever your system that you jam on is. But I think that, the peopling side of business often, to your point, can feel challenging. What I've seen in past is that it kind of feels like you're going into the principal's office to be rated or given a report card when it comes to your performance, when in actuality, it ought to be a two-way dialect or conversation in the sense that, again, there shouldn't be surprises, but how we're approaching it as a leader really, really matters. And understanding how we need to speak to our team members on an individual level. So it's not just like one size fits all in the sense of pentameter and delivering critical or harsh feedback, but rather doing it from a place of empathy and looking for growth. Because I've also seen in past, in some circumstances where leaders have come to me, the HR person, and they've said, you know what, like I tried to give this person feedback, but I didn't have all the information. And I felt really silly because come to find out there was this huge piece missing, and it totally changed the way that I looked at this. And so we kind of hashed that conversation out. And what came out of it was there's a distinct need from a leadership perspective to be more curious versus judging. And when we get into those performance conversations, in some circumstances, it's certainly okay to make observations. And of course, we need boundaries and expectations, but how we get there in that two-way conversation is really important. So asking questions like, I've noticed these things, or I have these observations, but I really want to kind of chat with you, Laura, to see what your take on it is, to make sure that we're on the same page or we have the same lens to this. And then holding that space in a respectful manner so that, team members do feel safe to speak and that safe to fail or fail fast. But totally agree with you that in some circumstances, we really need to understand, our team members and employees to make sure that's a right fit for the role, the department, and the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. There absolutely needs to be a two-way street of communication. And there's no question that my company has grown and improved in what we call like leveling up because of the feedback coming from the team.
For sure.
And I always tell new team members on their first day or their first week, because we encourage them to set up coffee chats with various people within the organization, me always being on that list, is, don't be intimidated by me. Like, raise your hand. This is not a organization where we're going to, get upset or yell or do anything. If you have an idea, like, I want to hear the ideas because the reality is I don't want to have to come up with all the ideas. Like, it's a lot of work and strain to have to try and think everything through. So perspective from all levels of an organization are so important to have.
Definitely, for sure. And I think too that, especially having your team members buy-in out of the gate to new ideas and helping you plan where they're living the everyday, they can see some of those blind spots where you may not.
Exactly.
I'm in the same boat in the sense of being uber transparent as to how we're pivoting as a young business and how we're growing, to get that knee-jerk reaction from our consultants to understand, and seeing it in their clients and partners as well, that it's very advantageous to kind of set the tone that, it's just an open, continuous conversation to find those blind spots and be able to solve them.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me more about your thought process around the concept of intentional leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing with intentional leadership and also just growing a business overall, especially a service business, is that my biggest IP, my biggest differentiator or competitive advantage is how good the people are that are on my team.
Right.
And a big lesson of over the years of building this business is in the early years, I was always very revenue focused of signing new clients and keeping that flywheel going. But in the last 2 years, we've really focused more internally because we already have a existing flywheel of referrals from existing clients and just reputation of how we can improve the career paths for every employee. It's not just like, oh, they're in this dead end job and that's their life. We want people who are aspirational within our organization. So we chat with them. Where do you want to see yourself in 6 months? Where do you want to see yourself in 12 months to 24 months? Really taking the time and making the effort to know these aspirations is super, super important, and how you can maintain good retention with your star players in your team. I think the other thing is it has to be a part of your company's goals or initiatives to be good leaders and to put an emphasis on your team. If it's a back thought or something that is not a primary focus, then you're not going to be good at it, plain and simple. It doesn't just come second nature to all of the leaders within your team.
Right.
So you also need to think through, okay, how can I give the directors and managers within my organization autonomy of kind of the subcultures that they want to produce, while also having a consistency across the organization. And like everything, it takes work, and you have to have meetings, and you have to reflect and plan and think on it, and then put processes in place to make sure that whatever you decide to do moving forward is actually implemented. Because I think that's another thing that's really easy for small businesses to get caught up with is they do the planning, they do the work, and then a quarter into it, they're so busy and everything gets dropped. And then you come back 6 months later, like, oh yeah, why did we stop doing this? So like you also need to have those checks and balances in place.
So what I'm hearing is that, from a cultural perspective, it's having agreed upon ways for all departments or leaders to move forward with certain things, but also giving them enough autonomy and empowerment that they can have what you call their subcultures, so that they're doing that same thing, but kind of in their own way or with their own vibe, I think is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally agree with that 100%. Because we can't have the expectation of leaders to just be able to follow something, to the T, right?
And I don't want my team and my managers within my team to be robots either.
Of course. That's kind of
talk about being humans, right? Like it's, and I think what's cool about our organization too, is we're a global team. So we have a team based in Latin America. The US is obviously our largest team. And then we have a team based in the Philippines. So like those team leaders of those geographical areas, like I absolutely want them to have their own subculture within our organization.
Definitely.
And like even from an HR perspective or like a culture perspective, we encourage them, like our team in Dominican Republic, they will go, like we'll sponsor for them to go have their own happy hour, right? And they can build camaraderie that way. Same with the Philippines, but then we also do virtual events too, so that everyone can still interact and have a good time. We always like the Airbnb experiences and do their cooking classes, just as another way to kind of lighten the mood. And it doesn't have to always be about business.
Right. So help me understand this, because I'll be totally vulnerable. This is the first time I heard of this. So your team's remote, but you're taking an Airbnb cooking class together in your own space, or like, how does that work?
Oh yeah, it's a really cool program. I mean, they do cooking classes along with a bunch of other experiences, but you basically join a Zoom call like this, and a woman in Mexico is teaching you how to make street tacos and tortillas from scratch. And then what we do is we send our team just like Visa gift cards to go buy the ingredients. And then, everyone dials in from their own kitchen.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. So hearing you in the sense that when it comes to intentional leadership, it's really getting strategic about how you're approaching things, both from the tactical side of things, so creating consistencies, but also the human side of things to continue momentum and create engagement as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's such simple ways you can do it. Like come up with different creative Slack channels, right? Like I know it sounds so cheesy, but like we have a Slack, we have a Slack channel for all of the pet owners in the company. We have a Slack channel for all the parents in the company. We have a Take My Money Slack channel for when our clients are running deals on Amazon, and we promote it internally because we think it's a good deal. So, the biggest piece of advice I give people when they start at my company is don't be shy. I go, I want to see you active on Slack. That, I never want a team member to feel like they're just isolated in their home office on their computer working. I really, really try and draw people in and encourage them to be active within the company dialogue from a more fun angle. I used to do these, I still occasionally do them. I call them water cooler topics, because like that's the fun part about being in an office, right? Is those coffee chats or water cooler chats. And so I'd throw out like random prompts, like share your senior year prom picture or something, and like that's so lot of, it's a lot of fun. And some people, drum up things and you learn new things about different team members. And, there's always the curveballs and very, very humorous moments that I enjoy.
That's fantastic, Laura. Honestly, I've heard about, Slack channels and creating virtual experiences for team members from an engagement perspective. But I really enjoy the water cooler prompts. That's something new that I haven't heard yet, in the sense of really kind of creating, again, that human experience in the workplace, because it can get kind of monotonous talking about operations and tactics and sticking to agendas and such, right? So, really enjoying that piece for sure.
Yeah, but like you basically need a moderator, right? And so
Fair.
I, for the most part, have taken on that role as moderator, but like everything, it takes creative juice, right? You have to think about it, like what would be a good topic that would really stir the crowd and get people going. I'm not going to ask what your weather is today. That's just, I might as well just put the whole team to sleep at that point.
Yeah, it's a little blasé, right? When you're thinking like forward thinking to 2023, when it comes to this whole thought process around intentional leadership, what's top of mind for you to continue doing or to start doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the big thing that I'm doing is I have promoted someone internally at my team to be VP of People and Culture.
Awesome.
And the advantage of that is, like, I also think as being a leader, you need to be self-aware, knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you like doing, and what you don't like doing. Like there's 100%. This is it's I forget what it's called. It's the matrix of some sort.
Yes.
It's very popular in like EOS and the book Traction and some of those. So that is a really good exercise for every manager or potential leader within your organization to do. And I will be very honest, and myself, I love people. I'm an extrovert, but I don't necessarily love managing people and training people because, as I kind of alluded to earlier, like I'm a salesperson at heart. I love driving new business. I love developing new programs. That is what I'm good at, and that is what I love to do. So looking forward to next year, that's really where I'm designing our org chart and our accountability chart to accommodate, because I do have a team member who's wonderful at onboarding and training and making new team members feel comfortable and working with existing team members to build that career path. So if he's really good at that and that's what he loves to do, I'm then going to put him in that seat to be successful and also make all of the other managers within my organization successful through the processes that he will be building.
100%. It's leaning into individual strengths to off balance yours in the sense of, what you're looking to do versus not, and strengths and your areas of growth or blind spots. And I think there's a larger picture here, Laura, in the sense of oftentimes we look at leadership blind spots or our strengths or our likes or dislikes based on EOS models or whatever you're following. There's a larger piece here too, I think, that ought to have focus. And it's as your organization grows, what does the organization and the people within your organization need? Not just what can your leader give you or not give you. And I think what I'm hearing, kind of reading between the lines, is that you're organically doing that in the sense of knowing that your organization needs sound onboarding programs and procedures, and knowing that VP of people and culture is really important and pivotal to make sure that your people are getting what they need so that you can focus and continue building your business and anecdotally be there from a place of your own strengths.
Yeah. And look, running a 50-person business versus a 15-person business is very, very different on the leadership and the management side of things.
For sure.
And I bring this up because pre-COVID, my team was 15 people. Today, my team is 45 people and will be well into 50 people in Q1 of next year.
Right.
So I feel like 50 people and 100 people, like these start to be those certain thresholds where you do really need to think about, okay, like I need a full-time recruiter. I need a head of HR. Like you don't need a head of HR when you're 10 people. But you definitely do when you're approaching 50 people. Because there's just a lot more administrative logistics that you need to be on top of. And there's all of the policies too that you need to think about. Like, so I'm pregnant, I'm due in April. But like a few years ago, I never really thought through like a maternity or a paternity plan for my team because there just wasn't that initial demand. Like my default was just like, I'll just follow whatever New York State says, because that's where we were operating business. Now we're fully remote. But now, you just have to think through like, okay, well, can we have these benefits be a competitive advantage to us in attracting top talent? Definitely. Like there's the whole HR side of business it's a complicated one. And I feel like it too often gets devalued or deprioritized. Because it's not directly tied to revenue.
Yes.
But especially if you're a service business, like I said, you're only as good as the people on your team. So if you don't have great people on your team because your HR policies aren't great, you're going to lose revenue. So you got to think through, like, how can I cherish and build up and have a really amazing company culture? Because the ROI on that is 100% there.
I agree. Definitely. And I mean, stats in past used to be 1-for-1 in the sense of what you're losing if you have to rehire someone. So one time someone's salary. In the past couple of years, it's creeping up to 2, even sometimes 3 times a person's salary annually when it comes to thinking about it from not just a logistical, but a monetary impact perspective. And then on top of that, you have knowledge that's leaving your business. If you have individuals that have been there for a few years, have been super invested and then become disengaged. So I can appreciate you in the sense of intentional leadership isn't just about what that leader does intentionally, but also how are you setting up your organization? How are you ensuring that the proper, not just the proper people are in place, but the proper departments, the proper policies and the whole 9 yards. I think that's fantastic.
And by the way, I think the other big lesson I've learned over the years too is you're not going to get it right the first time. And it goes back to being vulnerable and human as a leader.
Yes.
To admit when you don't get it right. Ask the team for additional feedback, right? Instead of just making another knee-jerk decision of like, okay, that's at work, we're going to do this. Like, no, make it a collective and then, optimize and improve. And optimizing and improving is what we do for our clients from a marketing and a product positioning perspective. And, because I'm a marketing and sales minded person, I always tie it back to people, because like when we do something wrong, maybe we make a bad hire, or we have someone leave because we didn't give them the right opportunities, whatever it be, you have to stop and reflect on it. You can't just be like, oh, well, they sucked anyways. Like, no, you have to take responsibility for how your actions caused that issue.
Always.
Because we're all at fault in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of failures can be avoided, but as the saying goes, like fail fast, but learn from it. Just don't keep making that same mistake. But now I think another approach is that we're implementing next year with our VP of People, given our size now, is we're really thinking about how we can take the marketing tactics that have been successful for us in acquiring great clients, and how can we reposition that so that we now actually have a marketing strategy to attract the top talent in the industry.
Definitely.
Because like the truth is, sales and signing a new client is no different than recruiting and onboarding a top person in the industry. So that's some other, I guess, tactics and strategies that we're thinking through and working through, because the stronger your team is, like it just compounds, right? You just, the better people on the team, the more exciting, the more inspired the rest of the team is. You just continue to then collect even more top talent.
Definitely.
Where companies struggle is if they have maybe one or two leaders and everyone else is kind of like at par. And then those leaders are having to pull the weight of everyone else. And so you want to have that, I know it's cheesy, but like you want to have that A team as much as possible. And by the way, the A team is different in every organization, right? Every organization has their own culture. They have their own dynamic, and even the time of your team or the time of your company and where you stand in terms of revenue size, people size, maturity, etc. Like that varies what makes a perfect team member as well.
Yeah.
So I read, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's written by the former head of HR for Netflix.
Yes.
What's the name of that book? But like she talks about in the book how there were amazing A players during the high growth period of Netflix, and that those same team members weren't necessarily A players once the company became more corporate. And she would have just like very human, very candid conversations of like, are you happy here? Because you don't seem like you are, because your performance has dropped. And they would open up and be like, yeah, like I miss how things used to be. Right. And she would say, well, great. Well, I know of another startup that's actually looking to hire in your position. And I think that's a big thing, is if you can help people transition to, like, if you know that they were a great and loyal employee, but maybe they've outgrown the company or the company has outgrown them, help them along with that.
Right. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's about those genuine conversations. And what I like to associate with is that, you're not exiting the team member, you're helping them graduate. Because for whatever reason, it's not a fit. And especially, in the HR industry, oftentimes, like-minded HR people in the same industry, different companies. So there's always ways that you can help those individuals. So that's a win-win, whereby they're graduating from your company onto a position that they love and they can jam with. And it's a win for the company, because then it allows that kind of revolving door in a good way for individuals to step in that fit the, instead of the scaling style company, now the corporate company, because it's also graduated.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and when I have had good people leave, I've always mentioned to them that I consider them an alumni and they're always welcome back.
Oh, that's amazing. I like that.
And thus far I've had one person boomerang back. Maybe we'll maybe we'll get a few more boomerangs in the next few years.
That speaks volumes to your culture, Laura. That's amazing. One thing that I was kind of curious about as you were talking, how do you intentionally set your leaders up for success and growth within your company?
So with the leaders, once again, I think it goes back to knowing, like them knowing what their department and what their role is accountable for. And also them knowing our processes when someone isn't meeting expectations so that there isn't that buildup of frustration. Because that's, once again, the big thing is we don't want microaggressions. We don't want anything like that. And what's really easy to happen, right, is someone does mediocre on something and then they do mediocre on something else and it compounds. How we try and really train our managers and our team is when that first mediocre thing comes through, don't hold back on the feedback. Even if it can feel uncomfortable. The term that we'll use, and it's super cheesy, is like, hey, like I'm just going to preface that we're going to rumble a little bit here. Like this conversation might be a little uncomfortable, but like it sets the stage instead of just being brash, like, hey, what you gave me sucked, right? Like that's
yeah, we don't want to go there. No,
that's not constructive either.
No.
But it could be like, hey, like this is fine, but how can we get this to great? And maybe the person will say like, I'm sorry, I just had a lot on my plate, so I rushed it. I know I didn't do a good job, but we still want the team member to be honest about why. Right now, if they like get argumentative and say, no, this is great, like that's then when we'll start to think like, okay, how can we assess the situation? Are they a good culture fit? Because our culture really is that it's not about being right or wrong. It's about working together to find a desired outcome. Right. And that's how we are with our clients too, right? Like I've dealt with clients who just want to blame all their problems on the work my team has done. And that's not a constructive way of doing things. So then we have to get on the phone too with the clients and say, hey, this has occurred, like this has occurred, but like, how can we come together on this? And honestly, I think another way that the managers and the directors in my team, as well as myself, kind of protect our team and protect our culture is making sure that we have the right clients that we work with. Because as a service business, right, we obviously have our internal culture, which I think we've done a great job at developing. But we let other company cultures into our day-to-day as well, right? By collaborating with them. Yes. And obviously there are things that happen, like client animosity is going to occur. We can't all be perfect 100% of the time. But if a client is really brutal and really toxic, I do not hesitate in having tough conversations and rumbles with those clients to decide like, hey, maybe this isn't the right partnership for you. Like maybe you're looking for an agency that will respond to your messages at 6 a.m, right? Like, like we try and really set boundaries in place so that we're all on the same page and we can have a mutually respectful relationship.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. For sure. Laura, I feel like I could talk to you for hours about intentional leadership, but I know that we both have busy schedules. So one last thing for you, when it comes to leadership in general, what would you like our audience to hear based on your largest learnings around leadership?
I mean, I think the big thing for me is that you have to work on the muscles of putting yourself out there. Like there's also being a leader within the industry. So like for me, it took me a good 2 years to really become comfortable with putting myself out there and posting on LinkedIn, but in a really amazing way, like by sometimes saying opinionated things and building my following there. It also excites my own team because they know that we're building, or that, that their CEO has this credibility within the industry. And I think another thing too is I really try and frame all of the wins that we achieve as a company, it's team wins, right?
Yes.
Like we all did this together. So like when we win awards, like this is the work of all of us. It's not just select individuals.
Definitely, for sure. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura, and joining us on the Human Side of Business podcast. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.